And a good Monday afternoon to you. Welcome on in to lunch with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com. And Merry Christmas to everybody out there watching. I'm Joe Roderick, joined alongside by Mike Claiborne. Claibs, what's going on?
All good, man. We are in the heat of the holiday season. Gatherings here, games there. Great weekend of sports, especially on the football side. And really good basketball game yesterday between Missouri and Illinois. Missouri makes a couple free throws. They beat Illinois. But overall, all is good, and I'm looking forward to this week.
Absolutely, a lot of football stuff to get to as we go on, and I know we mentioned it, we teased it a little bit last week, but a pretty big announcement coming your way. Maybe not next week, maybe the first week of January from us here at Claibs Online. So something to keep your eye on, keep your ear to the ground as we get ready to make that announcement to all of you for the new year. Just a little bit of a teaser, Claibs, as we
is that what that
2025? Yeah, just a little bit.
Oh, okay, all right, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I could. Claibs, before we get into all the football stuff, before we talk about everything that happened, college and pro. Major League Baseball lost one of the greatest of all time. If you ask him, the greatest of all time, as Hall of Famer Rickey Henderson passed away this past weekend at the age of 65. And Claibs, I know you had you and Rickey, you knew each other well.
Yeah, I didn't really know him until he started playing in the National League. I mean, you think about how many teams he played for, and he's just a good player. I mean, as I said to you earlier, he might be one of the 5 greatest players to ever play when you think about his impact on the game. And I was blessed to be able to run into him this year when we played out in Oakland. And we had sat and talked for a while. And, what you see is what you get with Rickey. And there's so many stories about him. And some people have added a little water to them. But I think one of my favorites. So, back in the day, before when you got on a plane for a road trip, they give you an envelope. So let's say it'd be $100 a day per diem. So you go on 10 game, 12 game road trip, it's a lot of cash. So one morning his daughter came in his room and he was half asleep. And she said, "Dad, can I have some money for school?" He said, "Yeah, go ahead, just take one of those envelopes." Because he never opened his envelopes. He said, "Just take one of the envelopes." So she took an envelope that had over $1,000 in it, right? So she's bought this money at school, and now the school is like, wait a minute, where does a kid get $1,000 from? To the point where they called home and just said, well, your daughter's here with $1,000. And it didn't dawn on anyone because Rickey wasn't thinking about the envelopes. He didn't know what was in them. And it was kind of amusing. The $1 million, when he signed for $1 million, it was $1 million signing bonus, and he never cashed a check. He had it framed because he felt he was an official millionaire. So when they gave him the check, he took it home and got it framed. So at the end of the year, when Oakland, the bookkeepers were like, well, wait a minute, he never cashed a check. So they called him and said, "Hey, listen, you're gonna have to go cash that check." And he said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, you're not a millionaire yet unless you cash a check." So he eventually cashed it, and they gave him a copy of it, and he framed it anyway. But a different dude. I'm not sure if you heard he played in Toronto, wore the helmet.
The John Olerud story is fake. That right? The John Olerud story is a fake story, but
I'm not gonna say it's fake. I think that what happened was here's where it became fake. Is where when Rickey allegedly got to first base and said, I used to play with a guy like that.
I thought the story was that he played with him in Toronto and then played with him again in the Mets and went to him and asked him when he was with the Mets. He goes, "Why you wear that?" And it was, "Oh, I played with a guy in Toronto that wore a helmet too."
Similar. But he really didn't have the conversation with Olerud. He had it with a teammate. He was sitting in a dugout. He said, "I used to play with a guy like that who wore a helmet like that." And somebody said, "Yeah, you play with him wherever it's town," because he played for so many towns. Another Rickey story. Veterans normally sit in the back of the bus. You go into the ballpark or go in the airport. And Rickey decided to sit like in the middle of the bus or the front. So one of the veterans said, "Ricky, you don't have to sit up there. You have tenure. You don't have to sit up there." And Ricky said, "Oh, I got more than tenure. I got at least 16 years in the game." Get it?
The other one that I've seen making the rounds is he saw something of a scripture of John 3:16, and his response was, "Ricky don't want to hear about no John 3:16. Ricky's hitting 340."
Yeah, I heard that one too. Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of them, man. Harold Reynolds tells a great story. Ricky got hurt one year and didn't finish the season. So Harold Reynolds and another guy were competing for stolen base championship, and they were playing each other in the last game of the season. So Harold was able to steal one. The other guy went for 0 for 4. So Harold's a stolen base champion. He had like 60 steals. He gets a phone call from Ricky the next day. "Harold, hey, who's this?" He said, "This Henderson." He said, "Hey, Ricky, how you doing?" He said, "Just want to let you know, Ricky just stole 100. He just stole 60 by the All-Star break. So I just want you not to get too comfortable in thinking you can steal more bases than me in a whole season." I mean, who thinks like that? But I'll tell you this: when you look at his career, we always talk about the stolen bases. But, man, what he did for Tony La Russa's lineup, where he led off games and hit more home runs as a leadoff man than anybody in the game, it's really nice to have somebody can put you in the lead before you even take the field. And his defense was solid. He's a Gold Glover a couple of times. He was an MVP. He was a tough out, a very tough out. And the reason so many stolen bases, he stole third a lot. He was one of the best third base stealers the game has ever seen. Mm-hmm. And you look at his numbers and you look at like Lou Brock. Lou was really good at stealing second, but Ricky could steal third with anyone.
He ended his career, still today holds Major League record for stolen bases with 1,406, most runs with 2,295, and stolen bases in a single season of 130. You mentioned Tony La Russa, and when La Russa came over to the Cardinals, when he left Oakland and came to St. Louis, brought some guys with him. You were covering the team at the time. Was there ever any chance you thought that Ricky Henderson was going to end up a Cardinal at any point in the late 90s?
No. He and Tony had a little rift at some point. Oh, here's another great one from Ricky. They had a rift about something. And Ricky had kind of moved on from it. So he just said, "Man, I'm just going to let bybyes be bybyes." Instead of bygones be bygones, he called bybyes be bybyes. And so they had some sort of rift, misunderstanding. And so that never materialized. I mean, but what a good player. He will be sorely missed. And the ironic thing is, he lived in Oakland. I mean, he was born in Chicago, but he actually grew up in Oakland. Yeah. And he still lived there. He still lived. He never left Northern California. And they brought him back, and he would come in. He'd be in uniform before games. And he was there to talk to anybody and everybody about anything about the game. And you talk about giving something back to the game. He was very instrumental in doing that. And I think there's some guys on that Oakland A's team that'll tell you what an impact he had. And he talked to the other team too. Yeah. Because I introduced him to Mason Wynn, and he had, just sat and just talked to him about the game, man, taking care of your body. And that's the one thing that we don't talk enough about. Ricky Henderson was as in good a shape as any athlete you'll ever see. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ricky Henderson passes away at the age of 65. Claibs, a lot of news over the weekend in Major League Baseball, a lot of free agent signings, and one trade that did not happen. You and I last week were talking about the possibility of Nolan Arenado being moved, and you had kind of hinted at the fact that it was nearly a done deal, just needed one more thing to sign off to make it happen. And apparently that did not happen, as
that
we
wasn't
found out
the team
over
I was
the weekend.
Talking about, though.
Really?
That wasn't the team I was thinking of.
So that Nolan Arenado rejecting a trade to the Houston Astros this over the weekend, and the Astros then turn around. They go and they sign Christian Walker to a 3-year, $60 million deal. So they have their first baseman. We were all wrong on thinking Paul Goldschmidt was going to be the next first baseman of the Houston Astros. Paul Goldschmidt, in turn, signs a 1-year deal, $12.5 million, to go to the New York Yankees and be a protection of Aaron Judge in that lineup. So the Yankees, since losing out on Juan Soto, the Yankees have in turn gone and they traded for Cody Bellinger. They signed Paul Goldschmidt. They signed Max Fried. They traded for Devin Williams. So they lose out on one player and they go and get 4 other All-Stars in place.
I think it's been a great move for the Yankees. They would be my odds-on favorite to be in the World Series right now with the moves that they made. Picking up Devin Williams was huge. Now, that means, he's going to go to arbitration and, he's going to make a lot of money. But I think overall, I think the Yankees are better off today than they were in the last game of the season. And, Juan Soto, he'll go across the street and play for the Mets. Mets are going to be good. I mean, you know what? We talked about this last week. I'm not surprised we're seeing these deals being done before the holidays kick in, because I think everybody learned last year to sit out and wait and play that game. It didn't work. And that was more of the owners than the players. They wanted to squeeze some guys, and they did. But overall, I think I've seen some teams make significant improvements in their ball clubs. And, it's not over by a long shot. There's still a lot of good players out there.
So the new rumors now have Nolan Arenado possibly going to the Yankees. Astros still on the table there. A reported deal over the weekend that never made it to Arenado was a deal that would have sent Marcus Stroman to St. Louis in return for Nolan Arenado. And the reports say that the Cardinals had no interest in adding Marcus Stroman to their team. Thus, the deal was nixed before it was even brought up to anybody.
Well, kudos to the Cardinals for not bringing in Stroman.
Yeah. No, you've mentioned it before. I know you're not a Marcus Stroman fan.
No. But, here's the other thing about the Arenado deal. I want to go back to the Houston thing. We don't know why he turned it down. Okay, that's the first thing. I mean, maybe they didn't promise him or assure him of what they were also trying to do. Maybe he wanted a little bit more on the back end for another year on the contract. I mean, so, just to say I don't like Houston because of the weather or whatever, there are a lot of things that might have gone into that. And then, here's the other thing. The Houston Astros have not decided what they're going to do with Alex Bregman. So maybe that kind of held him blowing in the wind. And, when you look at this, I don't think Nolan Arenado was anyone's first priority as far as a free agent or as far as a trade is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I've not heard one team that was wetting their whistles hoping to make a deal. And you know what? It should be reasonably easy, knowing that you want to move a guy. The other team knows you want to move a guy, so they're not going to give you their dynamic prospects. So it should be an easier deal to do than you think. I think Nolan Arenado may have said to himself, can this team win? I mean, was he given assurances that they're going to continue to improve? So there are a lot of things that go into it. It's just something that we'll probably never know, or maybe we'll know later in life.
If you're the Yankees right now, Alex Bregman's still out there, Nolan Arenado still out there for a potential trade. Which third baseman would you rather have?
I'd probably take Bregman because of his youth and the fact that he's a more complete hitter right now than Nolan Arenado. I mean, Nolan Arenado didn't have the best of years. Now, who's to say if he's in a different batting order with some other good people that could change? But I think overall, Bregman probably has more upside as we speak. But, when it comes to defense, Nolan Arenado can still pick it. He can still do a lot of things. I think the question is, which one do you think is a winning player?
Yeah.
And think about that. Who's the guy who knows how to win? Nolan Arenado's never won a playoff series. Alex Bregman's been part of world championship teams. Bregman can hit anywhere in the order. So I think there are a lot of things that go into that. On why Bregman is still a very sought-after player.
Right. Yeah, I mean, year after year, Bregman played in the ALCS for the Astros and a few World Series, won one of them where, yeah, you mentioned the Arenado deal. Same with Goldschmidt, too. Goldschmidt was in, one NLCS here where they didn't win a game. And outside of that, never won any other playoff series beyond that.
And it's kind of unfair in a way to blame them. But when they're marqued as your best players and they don't produce, and neither one of them did, then you kind of say to yourself, okay, well, this is where it starts. When you also look at the fact that how about Phoenix, Arizona turning out two really good first basemen. They've only had two in the last 15 years, 20 years, in Arenado and in Goldschmidt and now Walker. And Walker, the year the Diamondbacks got to the World Series, if you look at his numbers that year, he should have been more in the conversation for most valuable player.
Yeah.
So it's a good deal. I think the question is, his age. He's a little older as a free agent than some, but we'll see. I think it'll be an interesting situation.
Now the big one left is Pete Alonso. He's out there still looking for a home for the next season. He's going to get a big deal. We know it's going to be a massive couple $100 million deal that he's going to get with the Yankees.
Do you think so? Do you think so? Or yes. Do you see him taking a 3-year deal?
No. I could see him. It would not surprise me if he had a 10-year, $500 million deal.
Yeah, I'd be on the floor. He's a first baseman.
10-year, $400 million deal.
No.
He's a 50 home. I mean, he's a guy that can hit 40 to 50 home runs for you.
Okay. I think that's reserved for certain players, and he's not one of them. And the reason why I say if he was that valuable, the Mets would have re-signed him. They have more money than anyone.
And Mets still can re-sign him. The option's still there.
I don't think you'll see it. I just don't see it.
Who do you see him going to then?
Well, I think he can go to a lot of teams. I think he can go to the Mets. He can go to the Cubs. I mean,
Mets. Those would be the first two I would think. Mets and Cubs, first two that come to mind for me too.
Yeah, but I think that in the situation of this long-term 10-year deal, you know what? Let's not fall in love with that situation because normally it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work normally. And while the Ohtani deal is virtually going to pay for itself in the first 3 years, I'm not sure. If you look at the Stantons, you look at some other players who had these long-term deals, would you do it again? And the answer would be no. And I think Alonso would fit in that category.
Yeah. And with Alonso, I mean, yeah, I think over time, I think it does pay for itself. Not 3-year return like what Shohei would be getting, but I think when you look at all of the milestones that Pete Alonso is probably going to reach here in the next few years, if he stays healthy, I think that would be a case of it paying for itself.
Well, you see a different Alonso than I do. I don't see any of what you're talking about. I think he's a very good player. I don't think he's iconic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he hits for power. I think here's the other thing you have to take into account. Wherever he goes, he's got to be surrounded by some other good hitters because if not, they'll pitch around him.
Right.
So you would think in the first place he would go to a team that's got a winning opportunity, which means they should have good players on that team. But overall, he's going to have to make a contribution. But if he's in one of those lineups where we think we're going to get better, he'll never see a strike from me. And then I'll see who leads the league in strikeouts.
Right. We'll see more of see how many more deals get done here, I guess, today, probably before a Christmas break comes your way with some of the signings, and then get back into it with some more of the last few guys that are left on the board here throughout Major League Baseball. Claibs, let's take a break. When we come back, it's college football time. The playoffs saw their first round this past weekend. We will get into that right here on Lunch with Claibs and Joe.
Are you ready for a challenging and rewarding career? There are quality jobs in the construction industry.
I got out of college and my career choices were very limited, and this provided me with a plan for the present and the future at the same time.
I actually have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was making less than I make as a first-year apprentice painter.
I didn't go to college. I have no college debt. I make more money than the majority of people I know that went to college.
Take your first step towards a rewarding career. Visit stlouispdf.org.
Back here at lunch with Claibs and Joe here on Claibs Online. Joe Roderick, Mike Claiborne with you. Claibs, the college football playoffs. We saw the first 4 games on Friday and Saturday, and nothing really close in any of those games, and it has a whole lot of people bitching and moaning today about teams that deserve it and what the first round should have been. And I'm already annoyed with the amount of complaints, primarily from the SEC teams here after the first round.
Well, you know, I thought Tennessee could go into Ohio State and win. I just thought they matched up well. But, you know, here's what I tell people, man, first of all, none of these kids go this far into a year and deal with inclement weather, because normally your bowl game is under a dome or it's in a warm weather city if you go that far. And, you know, a home game at this time of the year is more valuable than we thought. But, you know, you can always talk about who shouldn't be in, you know, and you know me, I go back to schedule. But, you know, these teams won their leagues and therefore they're in. I'm not sure if the teams on the outside looking in, with the exception of Alabama, would have done better.
No. Absolutely not. The amount of complaining that was done. Friday night was the first game. Notre Dame, Indiana was the first game. And Indiana comes out. They lose by 10, whatever, to Notre Dame. Okay, Notre Dame was the better team. Notre Dame lost one fluke game all year at home to Northern Illinois. Aside from that, they've beaten everybody pretty handily on their roster, on their schedule throughout. Notre Dame, I think you could make an argument, would be ranked the number 2 team in the country right now if we actually had those type of rankings out at the end of the season. So the amount of complaining about Indiana not belonging there the next day. Lane Kiffin was a big one, complaining about it on Twitter because Ole Miss got left out. Nick Saban still carrying the flag for Alabama, complaining about them. And the fact of the matter is, Indiana went out there and they lost one game all year. They lost one game all year to Ohio State, and that was the one loss. Alabama, on the other hand, lost to Oklahoma. They lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to teams that were not good this year. And if you want to sit here and argue strength of schedule and all of that, if the committee wants to sit here and have different precedents for how they're going to make this tournament in future years, you need to go out and you need to lay out a plan to all of these schools and say, hey, if you want to be taken seriously, here is what your schedule should look like year in or year out, or else we're not going to look twice at you.
Well, then that's why Indiana would have been sitting at home watching this thing on TV.
Right, but they went out there and they lost one game. All these previous years that we've had since we've had the Final Four, the amount of times that Central Florida has been left out. Last year, Florida State being left out, thinking that they had
But they don't play anybody.
That's the thing. What I'm saying, though, is they had undefeated seasons and they were left out. With this new tournament, okay, hey, we have 12 teams now. We'll give you a shot. Great. You got beat in the first round. Go home. You give them the opportunity with that, because if it was just a 4-team playoff, Alabama wouldn't be in there. Ole Miss wouldn't be in there. They wouldn't have any kind of argument if it was a 4-team playoff. It's a 12-team playoff. You let the other schools have in. You let the SMUs have a chance. You let Indiana have a chance when you're a 12-team playoff to go out there and maybe prove themselves after they put together a body of work in the regular season.
Well, they proved something, all right. They weren't good enough.
Indiana lost to Notre Dame by less than.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You think Indiana could beat Alabama or Ole Miss?
I don't know.
Okay.
They went out. You know what? They had the smallest margin of defeat this weekend of any of the 4 teams. Indiana did. Yeah, but they went into South Bend and they lost by 10 points.
But did you watch that game?
I did.
Okay. Do you really think Indiana was in that game?
No.
Okay. All right. So
I've also watched Alabama go, and they got the shit beat out of them by Oklahoma this past year.
All right, but you know what? Here's what I would say to that. Even though they lost to a better team than anybody Indiana played other than Ohio State.
No,
yeah. All right. again, I don't think Indiana could have beat Oklahoma.
But the thing is, Indiana went out there. They played. You could sit there and you could tell Indiana, hey, no more scheduling Western Illinois. Can't do it. You want to be taken seriously at the end of the year? Take them off your schedule. That's fine. No,
I'm going to go back to my initial formula. If you want to make this thing more reputable, you have one blood donor that's going to be in state. You're going to play a conference comparable. You're going to play a regional game against out of your conference. Missouri should be playing Iowa, and Indiana could be playing, whoever, Purdue. Well, they play somebody out of their conference. And then that fourth game is a wild card game that the networks want to have. And you know what? That's going to mean more to the selection process than saying, we only lost one game. Yeah, well, you didn't play anybody.
And that's fine. If that's going to be the requirements to making the tournament, that's fine. But if we're going to sit here at the end and say, Indiana lost one game, Alabama lost 3, we think Alabama should be in, then why the hell are we playing the regular season? Why the hell are we saying any of this matters if at the end of it we're going to sit in a room and say, hey, this is who we think the best 12 teams are. We're going to put them in.
Well, here's another factor that I think you have to take into account. And we saw it last year with Florida State. You have to be reasonably healthy. If you have a good player that goes down and you're right there on the fence, you probably won't get in. And let's say if Indiana –
if Georgia lost to Texas in the SEC championship game, Carson Beck's not playing next week. They said that they're pretty sure he's going to be ruled out.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go off the same formula that you used last year for Florida State, if Georgia loses that game to Texas, Georgia shouldn't have been allowed in the tournament, right?
Well, but hold on for a minute. You make it sound like Carson Beck is the second coming. He's a guy who manages an offense.
But he's their starting quarterback, and Florida State got penalized.
And you know what? And the guy who backed him up came in and did a better job.
I know, but if
they would have lost quarterback, that's you're missing my point. That team is a team. Okay, first of all, they can stop anybody defensively. Second of all, he's a game manager. Carson Beck was a game manager, and they just proved it last week when Beck went down. They run out another guy who was barely on the scout team, and he did a better job in the second half than Beck did in the first half.
I'm talking about an alternate universe where they lost that game, because then we're not sitting here talking about the quarterback doing a great job. I know.
They didn't.
But Florida State went out there and they still won the ACC championship game last year with their backup quarterback. And the committee still looked at that and said, you know what? You lost your starting quarterback. We don't think you're good enough anymore.
They lost 2 other guys, too, that they don't talk about. But you know what? Again, they don't have a preset rules to go by. I mean, that's why they have a committee to try and use logic compared to emotion. So they're not going to always get it right. But you know what? The bottom line is the people we're talking about right now, whether it's Indiana or Florida State of last year, they have no chance in hell in winning either last year or this year.
Right.
So let's talk about the teams that are legit, because I'm going to tell you something right now. Notre Dame has got in my opinion, has a very good path to be playing in the championship game.
Yeah.
I look at Oregon, very good chance to be playing in the championship game. And that's what I want to. I want to see the best team play. I don't care about the 12th and 11th team. Now, if there's a team that's really good that gets in like that, and I didn't think either one of these teams was that good, if they get in late, maybe they have a charge late. Now we got a whole new ballgame, But I don't know how often that's going to happen, if we're going to use this format. And I don't think anyone knows, because I think they'll have to tweak it at some point, because the scheduling thing is going to really – the 2 things college football has to deal with: NIL, portal. I'm sorry, 3 things: NIL, portal, and scheduling.
The portal definitely, the portal needs to be changed. So right now, the way they have this portal scheduled needs an overhaul. Yes, I hope they don't.
What would you do?
Don't allow any of it until after the national championship game.
So Very valid point. I think also what comes into play is if you're on a bowl game, if you're playing on a bowl game, don't you have to, you're protecting your own interests. Shouldn't you be part of that team?
Yeah. Let's use Mizzou for an example. Mizzou just announced last night, Bo Pribula, the backup quarterback for Penn State, left Penn State while they are in the college football playoff. He was their number 2 quarterback. He said, I got to leave the team. I got to go find a place to play next year. And now he commits to Mizzou.
Okay.
That should not happen.
I don't know why people are excited about a backup quarterback from a team that barely can score. He's the backup to a team that can barely score.
I want to talk about the scenario in which he's coming to Mizzou.
Your point is valid. Your point is very valid. There should be some mandate implemented to say, all right, this is when you can go. And, the thing is, these schools put pressure on and say, hey, man, if you can't make a commitment, we're going to move on. So he didn't want to be left without a chair when the music stops. And right. I get that. But I think there needs to be some adjustments. And I think your point about on when you can go in the portal is probably the best way to get this thing started. Yeah. Now, the NIL thing, that's going to be a little trickier because I'm of the belief that Congress will get involved in this and there'll be a widespread mandate on just having a boilerplate rules on what this looks like. Because the next step will be you'll see schools making these guys employees. And if you have employees, guess what? You're going to have a union. If you have a union, you're going to have a collective bargaining agreement. If you have a collective bargaining agreement, you may have a salary cap. I mean, it's coming.
I'm looking forward to the first guy that wins 4 national championships on 4 different teams.
That ain't going to happen. If he's that good, he's already playing in the league.
It doesn't. I mean, if he's that good, he's not changing schools every year.
No, he's chasing the money.
Yeah.
But my point being this,
and I think you're going to see some kids stay for 4 years because the money their senior year is going to be better than whatever the money could be their rookie year.
Perhaps, but see, here's the mistake that I think a lot of us are making. We think all these guys are getting $1 million a year to do this. That's not the case. There's more guys not making as much money than you think.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we all need to take into account. And if you don't earn it, you don't get it.
That should be the big thing too. You got a kid going to Michigan making $10 million as a freshman next year. When's the last time you saw a freshman football player out there that you could say was worth, whatever the scholarship they gave him for that freshman year?
I don't know anybody. I think the one who might be closest because of the height would have been Arch Manning. And if Hewers hadn't got hurt.
I'm talking from years past. I'm talking like Michael Vick's freshman year, or Trevor Lawrence, his freshman year at Clemson when he won. Any of those Alabama quarterbacks. I'm talking like who that you looked at that you could say, yeah, that guy's an NIL, that guy should have made $10 million that year.
Boy, that's a different animal though then. I mean, yeah, that's too different of an animal because the portal would have had an impact. Let's face it, they were all getting paid anyway.
Yeah.
Now it's just on the surface. I don't know what that round number is. Obviously $10 million is a lot of money. I'm anxious to see what that contract looks like. Is it deferred? Is it one lump sum? I mean, how is this thing shaking out? And that's where they have to come back and have some uniformity. And until they do, we're going to have this issue, and it's going to get so out of control. You're going to see coaches saying, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'd rather take a pro job as an assistant than deal with this crap.
We will we'll break down those games next week, the 4 that are on the schedule. And
here's something though about those games.
Yeah.
There are no more home games.
No.
Okay. And so it's going to be a different lay of the land. And I think that's what's going to make these games even more fun.
Two of the games next week already double-digit point favorites.
Which ones?
Penn State is a 10.5-point favorite over Boise. I feel like that's too much. I feel like Boise can score, and Genty can score from anywhere on the field, and Penn State can't.
Yeah, but Penn State plays pretty good defense.
They do.
Genty, who's a really good player, is a victim of where he went. Boise State was so good at one point, the other teams didn't want to play him. So they were kind of stuck with playing teams they didn't want to play as far as getting hype. And I thought the fact that he played at Boise State is the reason why he didn't win the Heisman, because nobody saw him play.
Yeah.
And the voters, and I don't know many voters, I know a few of them, and I know they didn't see him play. But, the Hunter story was a more, as my good friend Frank Cusimano would say, more of a sexier story.
Right.
So, but this will be interesting because if Genty's all you have to worry about, they may stack 8 in the box against him and shut him down early. And I haven't seen enough of Boise State's other components that's going to make this thing intriguing. Now, what's the other game?
Texas is a 14-point favorite over Arizona State.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Texas was, number 2 in the country almost all season, and Arizona State got in those final few weeks.
Let me tell you, when Clemson scored first, I just said this might be a long day for Clemson, because once Texas got it in gear, man, it was like, holy cow, how can we slow them down? And I give Dabo credit. He kept his team as close as he could. He just got outmanned. Ohio State, Oregon, what's the number there?
That is Oregon is a 2.5-point favorite.
They've seen each other before. That's about right.
And then Notre Dame and Georgia. Georgia's a 1.5-point favorite there. Which, that might as well be. You said there's no home games. That's down in New Orleans for that one. So, that's pretty. Those folks will travel there from Atlanta, from the Georgia area.
Wait a minute. You don't think they're going to travel from South Bend?
They will.
Shit. I'll make this prediction right now. That game would be split right down the middle as far as.
You think so?
Oh, hell yeah.
I thought that game was going to be at the in Atlanta. So I think that's the next round.
Yeah.
That there's games in Atlanta. Penn State, Boise, that's in Arizona. Texas, Arizona State, that game's in Atlanta. So Texas and Arizona State, that game's in Atlanta. I'm not sure how Georgia didn't get that as their for their home game for that. I don't know how are they determining who gets what?
That's a great question. Games? That's a great question. I don't know offhand. And here's the thing: they had to be careful about these bowls things, because these other bowls, I'll be anxious to see who shows up for them. Because if you're not playing for anything but just one more game, and the Missouri battle cry is 10 sounds better than 9 as far as wins are concerned. Okay, I guess that's all you have to play for at this point.
Where is State Farm Stadium? Is Penn State, Boise State? I don't know what State Farm. I don't know. It's State Farm Stadium. I don't know what stadium that is.
Fiesta Bowl, isn't it?
That's Fiesta Bowl. I thought that's.
They're playing in Arizona. That's what they call it, State Farm, where the Cardinals play.
Is that State Farm?
Yeah.
Because Oregon, Ohio State's at the Rose Bowl. Okay, so State Farm is okay. You're right. So we'll talk more about those next week. We are going to take our final break, Claibs. When we come back, talk a little NFL here on Lunch with Claibs and Joe.
Let me get this straight. Gray Bar is a distributor?
Yep. For more than 150 years, we supported electrical and datacom projects all over the country.
So you can get me products wherever and whenever I need them?
Yep. Thanks to our expansive national logistics network.
For any industry?
Yep. From construction sites and industrial plants to schools, hospitals, and just about everything in between.
So you could say Gray Bar is much more than a distributor.
Yep, you could say that.
They really do it all.
Yep. When you need a hand powering, connecting, or maintaining your operations, join the thousands of professionals who rely on Gray Bar to help keep them up and running. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
Back here, final few minutes of Lunch with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com. Claibs, I got to say, with all the games, the college games on Friday night and then Saturday, this past weekend in the NFL, it just didn't really do it for me. Wasn't that locked in, I feel like, to the NFL games yesterday. Still a few good ones, and still the playoff picture, at least in the NFC, gets a little tighter with some of the results that happened. Still one more game tonight. Saints-Packers doesn't really mean a whole lot as far as playoffs go. with some of the standings. But what did you like from what you saw this past Sunday?
I thought I saw one of the best football games all year in Pittsburgh and Baltimore.
See, I didn't watch it because I was watching college this weekend, so I didn't watch that one.
Man, I just saw some flat out good defense, some good tackling. Russ threw a pick six. They had no answer for Henry, and this is one of the reasons what we talked about this early in the year. This is why Baltimore is dangerous now, because there's few teams that have the strength to tackle Derrick Henry at this time of the year.
Right.
The defense was a little better. I got to tell you something, man. The teams that we thought were going to be shoe-ins, like Detroit, I think Detroit's in trouble as far as their schedule is concerned, with them losing so many people. Pittsburgh is limping a little bit, and because they played so many games. And the Chiefs, man, with Thuney playing left tackle, this guy started off as a center, moved to guard, now he's a tackle. I just think he's going to be a guy that's going to get overwhelmed at some point in the playoffs if they face the right team. Eagles, by the way, who's coach of the year in the NFL?
Looking at this now, I mean, if they end up going 16-1, do you give it to Andy Reid?
Considering what little he's had to work with as far as actual weapons, especially from a receiver standpoint, he's in the hunt. You can't overlook what that guy in Washington has done with that team. They take a rookie quarterback, and they're playing for the division championship.
Yeah. He's rookie of the year. Jane Daniels rookie of the year, right?
What, is there somebody better? Not 35-year-old Bo Nix.
No.
Because they're going to watch playoffs on TV too, pretty much.
I mean, Malik Neighbors will have a new quarterback next year because they're, because with the number 1 overall pick, so you can't give it to him either.
No, I think Daniels is head and shoulders. Who's your coach of the year?
If I'm sitting here looking at this, I mean, I think I'm drawing a blank. What the guy's name in Detroit? What's his name?
Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I think it goes to Dan Campbell.
I'll tell you something.
Or you know what?
How he's navigated the injuries, he definitely is in that conversation.
I take that back. Regardless of if they win the NFL North or not, Kevin O'Connell. He's won 13 games this year right now with Sam Darnold as his quarterback, who 2 other teams looked at and said, nah, you're not good enough.
Yeah, but
Sam teams that are awful.
Sam Darnold didn't have Justin Jefferson to throw to on those other two teams.
But I think you look at what he has done, he has turned Sam Darnold into a very good quarterback this year. And I think for that, I think Kevin O'Connell's your coach of the year.
Boy, there's a lot of them out there.
There are.
I mean,
you give it to Sean Payton get credit because Sean Payton also, he has a rookie quarterback, and he was terrible last year with Russ.
Yeah, but they're going to watch playoffs on TV.
You think the Broncos end up falling out?
Yeah.
For that to happen, the Bengals have to win out, right?
Yeah. See, here's the thing. I think about you talk about him with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is older than every rookie out there.
Right.
Bo Nix has too much experience to put him in the same conversation with any of these other rookies. So for a guy who's got more experience at that position, I don't necessarily blow his horn that much. And so I probably put him in the next tier with regard to coaches. Right
now, Chargers and Denver, they sit with 9 wins in the AFC. Still looking one more win from either of those teams, they'll clinch a playoff spot. And things are getting pretty wild in the NFC, where in the NFC West right now, you have the Rams at 9-6, the Seahawks at 8-7, and the Cardinals lost a really bad game yesterday to go to 7-8 now. So their path to the playoffs gets a little more difficult. And then in the NFC South, you have Atlanta that's 8-7 and Tampa that's 8-7.
And Kirk Cousins is so bad they think they can win this thing with a rookie.
Yeah. And they're going to eat a lot of money next year to get rid of him.
I don't know how much they're going to eat.
I
because a lot of that was
it
in
was
signing
20
bonus.
million. I thought it was 20 million
Well,
dead cap next year.
There's a lot of teams walking around with dead money like that.
There's the NFL, the folks that actually navigate NFL salary caps and do that. I mean, it's a different level because whatever the salary cap is, whatever your team's finances look like, that a lot of that money just doesn't exist.
Yeah. No,
And
right.
there are really smart people that sit there and they figure it out every single year on how to make it work.
Yeah.
And we will never ever understand how some of that works for some of these teams. No. So, yeah.
All right, let's get out of here.
We are done for our show today. We hit on everything. We will we'll be back at it again next Monday, Claibs. Looking forward to wrapping up the year here with more football talk next week on the show.
And to all our viewers and listeners, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Enjoy your holidays. Stay safe. And we can't wait to talk to you because we're getting closer to being able to talk about something really fun that you're going to truly enjoy.
Absolutely. He is Mike Claiborne. I'm Joe Roderick. This has been Lunch with Claibs and Joe here on Claibs Online.